You are looking live, Fox Square, outside the world headquarters of Fox News, where we are counting down the final hours before polls close across the country Tuesday night, and we start seeing the first results in the 2018 midterms.
And here inside Studio F in America's election headquarters, where we are tracking all of the races in what is developing into an epic battle for the control of Congress.
Good evening, I'm Brett Baer.
And I'm Martha MacCallum. Both sides pulling out the stops in the final run-up to Election Day. President Trump doubling down on his big campaign push. He held two more rallies today, one in Georgia and one in Tennessee, where we'll go momentarily. While former President Obama also out there in force. He's hitting the Midwest to fire up Democrats in Indiana and Illinois, both urging people to get out and vote.
This is really one of the most important elections that we will ever have the privilege of voting in and for. This is a big one. It'll decide whether we build on the extraordinary prosperity that we've achieved for our nation, or whether we let the radical Democrats take control of Congress and take a giant wrecking ball to our economy.
Health care for millions is on the ballot. A fair shake for working families is on the ballot. And most importantly, the character of our nation is on the ballot.
President Trump has been crisscrossing the nation, hitting 11 rallies in 8 states in the final week, and it comes amid record voter enthusiasm on both sides of the aisle. A whopping 34 million people already casting ballots early, upping the anticipation for a high-stakes election day.
We've got Fox team coverage for you tonight. Peter Doocy in Florida following the contentious Senate race and governor race there, too, as well. Mike Emanuel's in Washington with a look at the House balance of power. Kristen Fisher's in Missouri tonight, where President Trump will hold the final campaign rally tomorrow.
But we begin with Steve Harrigan in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where President Trump is tonight. Good evening, Steve.
Brett, the president has been going strong for about 45 minutes, just getting stronger as the evening goes on. He seems to really be enjoying himself at the podium. If you saw some of these rallies during the 2016 campaign and the rally tonight, there's really no sense of any drop-off in enthusiasm or numbers. This stadium holds about 10,000 people. Most of them were out there for 8 or 10 hours waiting to get in. Some actually stayed overnight. This election for Senate, he's here to campaign for Marsha Blackburn, is really a record-setting election for the state of Tennessee. It set records for money spent, about $80 million spent, $50 million in outside money. Also records for early voting, 1.3 million people voting early. It's really on pace for a presidential election. The president is back here again, seeming to love the crowd, and they certainly love him here. The energy, the enthusiasm is really palpable. Back to you guys.
You know, Steve, real quickly, why are they saying the president's back in Tennessee? Are they seeing softening numbers for Blackburn, or just trying to fire up and ensure that firewall in the Senate?
I think it's really a sign of how close this race could be. It shouldn't really be that close of a race. President Trump, of course, carried Tennessee by 26 percentage points in 2016, but this is his third trip here, so it must be close. Blackburn is running against popular former Governor Bredesen. They're trying to paint him as a Washington Democrat and a real liberal, and the crowd is responding pretty enthusiastically whenever that charge is made. Back to you guys.
Steve Harrigan live in Chattanooga. Steve, thank you.
So meanwhile, President Trump heading to 3 states tomorrow, including Missouri, doubling down on his campaign efforts ahead of Tuesday, trying to help Republican Josh Hawley, the attorney general in that state, flip the seat and beat incumbent Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill. Kristen Fisher following it all for us from St. Louis tonight. Good evening, Kristen.
Hi, Martha. Well, this race is so critical because control of the Senate could come down right here to Missouri. And to give you an idea of just how important this race is to President Trump, he's come to this state 6 times this election cycle, and he's coming a 7th time tomorrow night for his final rally before Election Day. Now, for the incumbent, Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill, she says that the frequency of his trips here are both good and bad for her campaign.
I do think it's important to realize that he is coming a lot, and I think there's 2 reasons. One, which is good news, they're very worried, right? And 2 is bad news, they really, really, really want to get rid of me.
Now, her opponent is trying to get rid of her by tying her to the Democratic resistance. And it's a charge that she's really been trying to distance herself from by accusing some members of her own party of being the crazy Democrats. But Josh Hawley, who is the state's attorney general, he says that McCaskill is simply too liberal for Missouri, a state that he considers to be the firewall in these midterm elections.
The president said it best when he was in the state. He said the eyes of the world are on Missouri, and they sure are. What happens here is going to determine the course of the U.S. Senate and the Congress and the future of this country.
And this is also one of the closest races in the entire country. Martha, the latest Fox poll has these two candidates in a dead heat, dead even, 43-43.
Yes, so that explains, I guess, in part why both of these campaigns are really still on defense in the closing days of this race, Kristen.
Yeah, that's right. Hawley's been accused by a local paper in recent days of allowing outside political consultants to embed themselves inside his attorney general's office within weeks of being sworn in. And the paper goes on to say that those same political consultants went on to help him run this very Senate race. McCaskill calls it inappropriate and potentially illegal, but the Hawley campaign is countering it by comparing that report to an 11th hour smear, just like we saw with Judge Kavanaugh. As for McCaskill, her campaign is being accused of having a hand in these anonymous illegal mailers targeting Hawley that have been sent to voters all over the state of Missouri. She says that her campaign had nothing to do with it, but Missouri Republicans are now calling for a federal investigation, Martha.
We've seen a lot of those kind of charges in the final days in different states. Kristen, thank you very much.
Tuesday night is all about the balance of power in both the House and the Senate. Currently, Republicans hold the majority in the House with 240 seats. The Democrats have 195 seats, and there are 7 vacancies. So Democrats need a net gain of 23 seats to take the majority control of the House, meaning they need to hold all of their seats and pick up 23 more seats now held by Republicans. So anything short of that, Republicans retain control. On the Senate side, a different picture. The margin of error for Democrats much tighter. Republicans have a slim majority of 51. Democrats have 49. 2 independents caucus with the Democrats. So the Democrats need to pick up 2 seats to take control. Anything less than that, it stays with the Republican. Now, we're all set. Let's go upstairs to the data deck.
There he is.
There he is, way up there.
Up on the terrace.
Bill Hemmer.
Hello,
Standing by the touchscreen.
We've taken the data deck and supersized it this year. Come on, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Over here on the billboard, I tell you, you can take this map and this board behind me, guys, and talk about it for hours because there's 1,000 stories to talk about for Tuesday night. Let's start with the House that you just mentioned there a moment ago. Now, you could look at maybe 70 different House races that we will follow throughout the night. But these are the 29 that we think have a chance of flipping one way or the other, either red to blue or blue to red. So keep that in mind as we move throughout the evening. So then we wanted to figure out how do we tell a story about 41 retirements from Republicans and 23 districts Republicans are defending seats where Hillary Clinton won just 2 years ago. So it's an uphill climb. And I'll give you an example of what we're talking about. Here in the Midwest, come on over here to the map. Everything in red leans Republican, we believe. Everything in blue leans Democrat. The yellow is really a toss-up. So think about here in Chicago, Illinois, and I'll give you one example for what we're talking about. This is Illinois 6. It's a suburban district of Chicago. Pete Roscom's the Republican defending a seat against challenger Sean Casten. Now, why would you think about a race like this? It's definitely suburban. In a moment, I'll show you how much so. 2 years ago, the president lost this district by 7 points. Hillary Clinton was a victor. But who are these voters? The census data will tell you an awful lot. They are wealthy, almost 2 times the national average. At least 80% have a college degree or better, and they're overwhelmingly white at 77%. Suburban America, that's been red for a long time, shifted blue a few years ago. It's in all likelihood is probably purple this time of year. That's on the House side. On the Senate side, you could look at where we begin the night on Tuesday at 5149 on the what-if map. And, guys, you can take this and mess with it all you want. Missouri and North Dakota, Republicans think they have a really good shot. On the Democratic side, if they flip Nevada and flip Arizona, look where we are. We're back at 5149. That's where we started. So what's this all about? About 47 hours away, we'll get some poll closings. Then we will get some data and see this map fill in, guys.
Remember being up there, 2016?
Oh, yeah.
Watching all that map?
Punching as we go.
There you go. All right, Bill, thank you.
See ya.
All right. Speaking of history, history shows that the midterms are not usually kind to the party that's in the White House. With few exceptions, presidents have lost congressional seats in the election after they've won the presidency. Here with more, Fox News Sunday anchor Chris Wallace and Fox News senior political analyst Brit Hume. Gentlemen, great to have both of you with us this evening. Give us some examples. Let me start with you, Chris, about how this has generally worked in the past and, what the president can or can't call a good night.
Well, since World War II, the average in the first midterm after a new president is elected for his party is the House. They lose 28 seats. That's the average. And I think it's 2 to 3 seats in the Senate. So generally speaking, the country isn't entirely happy with the new president's party. The most consequential case I can think of is 1994. I just happen to have the numbers here with me. The Republicans gained 52 seats in the House, 8 in the Senate in 1994. This is 2 years into Bill Clinton's term. The Democrats had held on to the House since 1954. After 40 years of the Democrats controlling the House, it flipped. This, of course, was the contract with America, Newt Gingrich. And it was a dramatic, almost an earthquake on the American political scene.
All right, so let's look at the graphics. You mentioned 1994. That was 52 and 8. If we go to 2006, you've got House Democrats picking up 30 seats and Senate Democrats 4 seats. And then 2010, Republicans pick up 63 seats, Senate Republicans 6 seats. So as we look at this, Britt, you look at the early vote, more than 34 million already. People are fired up. And how that breaks on Tuesday will be fascinating to watch.
Well, it looked for the longest time, of course, as if the Democrats, animated by their feelings about Mr. Trump, were the party with the motivation this time. But recent events seem to contradict that. Republicans got very fired up over the treatment of Brett Kavanaugh. And it looks now as if it's not quite a wash, because I think Democrats are motivated to the max, but the Republicans have closed on them in the motivation department. The polling has looked better for the Republicans, but the odds still, the betting odds, as you've heard, which I like to talk about, still favor the Democrats getting control of the House. The betting odds, I think, are now about 67% to about half. It's about 2 to 1. In the Senate, the people betting on this rate the Democrats with only about a 67% chance of getting the House. So the Republicans look better in the Senate than the Democrats do in the House, but Republicans are favored in the Senate, Democrats still in the House. So that's how that looks now, I think, at this stage. And what we can't tell, Brett and Martha, is what is the Trump effect here? What is the effect of his late campaigning? I remember vividly, because I was covering the White House at the time, Bill Clinton campaigned. He really went after it in 1994 to try to save the Congress for his party. And he campaigned at least as vigorously as the president has, and it was all for naught. So here we were, Brett, all of us on election night, having watched the president campaign so hard and getting all these crowds that he kept boasting about. And we sage people knew that crowd size was not a very good indicator. Well, boy, were we wrong. So, we don't really know.
Yeah,
we may be in a new time. This man may have a pull that we can't quite measure by the usual metrics.
I think that is the question when we head into this, Chris. What is the Trump effect? In 2016, we all sat in this room and watched something that was so remarkable take place. And so here we are 2 years later, all that pent up energy from people who have been resisting this president and people who have been supporting this president. That's what it's going to come down to here, because these are so many close races.
But one key point, and again, I look at the fact that in the average first midterm, the president's party, the new president's party, loses 28 seats in the House. Presidents can be very, very popular and they can get big crowds, but their names are not on the ballot. People are going to go in, they're going to be voting for Senator X and Congressman Y. And as we saw with Bill Clinton, as we saw with Barack Obama, as we saw with George Bush, that doesn't always transfer from the president's popularity to what happens to his party in the House and Senate.
Do you both agree that the biggest issue swaying voters so far has been the Brett Kavanaugh process, that situation?
Well, well, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
I very much disagree. I think for Republicans, I think probably it's Trump for both sides. I think Trump is the animating factor. Now, there are other things. Brett Kavanaugh, immigration, the economy, health care. But I think people are going to come out and vote for or against Donald Trump.
I agree with Chris, basically. I think Trump is the big factor here.
And he may be the
and
reason.
Kavanaugh's attached to that, actually.
Yep.
Right.
He may be the reason that we see, if these numbers really do get amped up, it's going to be because of Trump.
Right.
Gentlemen, as always, thank you.
Thank you.
So will Republicans be able to block the blue wave? That's what we're just talking about. Or will Democrats make significant gains and take control back of the House? We'll go live to Capitol Hill with a look at what could happen with the balance of power and how these numbers need to move or not move.
Speaking of numbers, we are making a big change for these elections to give us a better understanding of how voters, what they're thinking, how they make their decisions, breaking down the new Fox News voter analysis system. Next.
Welcome back to our Sunday night special of America's Election Headquarters. The 2018 midterms, all 435 seats in the House are up for grabs. They have to run every single time, those members of Congress. Democrats will need a net gain of 23 seats to reclaim the majority, and that is clearly their goal. Mike Emanuel live on Capitol Hill with more tonight. So, Mike, what are Republicans facing leading up to Tuesday?
Martha, good evening. Republicans have 42 open House seats due to retirements or members running for other office. So you lose the incumbent's name ID and fundraising advantage. Some races to watch Tuesday night. In Virginia, Republicans Barbara Comstock and Dave Bratt are expected to have tough races in suburban districts. In New Jersey, Tom MacArthur and Leonard Lance, in a very blue state, are 2 seats to watch. If they hold on, Republicans may be holding their own. If these seats and the 2 in Virginia go to Democrats, then that will be a signal it could be a very long night for the GOP. Today, a leading House Republican predicted the GOP will get it done.
We're going to hold the House. I feel the enthusiasm. Every swing district I go into, you can see it. We're getting large crowds. A lot of feelings to what we saw 2 years ago at this point where, the Democrats were measuring the drapes. They were ready to win. And then something funny happened.
So Scalise and many other Republicans are working it in the final hours to make sure there is no blue wave. Martha?
Well, Democrats obviously want to counteract that. Are they as confident as they have been about winning the House?
Well, we'll see. Some recent polling suggests big picture registered voters prefer Democratic candidates over Republican candidates, at least in these House races. But the strong economy and concerns about border security are likely closing that gap. A key Democrat says he's feeling pretty good at this point.
The team, the side that gets the most turnout, it handles the ground game appropriately and aggressively is going to be the one that wins. And I feel good about our turnout across the country, and I think we're going to take the House back.
If Democrats take back the House, potential Democratic committee chairs in the next Congress could be Gerald Nadler of New York leading Judiciary, Adam Schiff of California leading Intelligence, and Maxine Waters of California leading Financial Services. If they are chairing committees, you can expect them to investigate all kinds of matters about President Trump and his administration. Martha?
No doubt about that. Mike, thank you very much.
Well, exit polls have been around since the 1960s. Fox News has been using them for nearly 20 years. But now we are making a change to Fox News voter analysis. Here to explain what that is and how it all works, Fox News Night at Night anchor Shannon Bream and the director of the Fox News decision team, Arnon Mishkin. Okay, Arnon, first to you. Just to explain in simple terms what we're doing, what this change is.
Okay, so we decided after 2016 that we needed, with the huge growth of absentee voters and early voters, when we're seeing that right now in the data, with the fact that in the 2018, over 6 of the top 11 Senate races are being held in states where over 2/3 of the vote is coming early. We decided we needed a different approach. These are voters who never exit a poll; they just vote early. So you can't exit poll someone who doesn't exit a poll. We are not doing an exit poll. Our objective is to come up with an understanding of why people voted the way they did, and we believe our new system is going to do that. And what we're going to do, just a brief description, is we're having a huge survey conducted by phone and online of over 125,000 Americans in our national sample. That compares to what we used to do, which was present a survey of about 25,000. That will enable us to show a lot more detailed, granular data about the electorate. And most important, we're going to have specific crosstab results in all 47 states where there are statewide elections, which we think is very important. One of the lessons of 2016 is the polling got it right. Hillary Clinton was headed to a significant 2-point victory in the national popular vote. What it got wrong was at the state level, and we need to measure state by state, because that's how America votes, state by state, how people are thinking and why they're thinking that way.
I mean, I think this is a really big deal because there's, as you said, it was 25,000 people in the exit polls. This is 125,000 people, and it's reaching them on the internet, on cell phones, and on their landlines because everybody knows that, not that many people use their landline anymore, Shannon.
That's true. And like Arnon said, it's starting ahead of the day of the election. So it starts Saturday, runs through when the polls close on Tuesday. So you're getting all those people who voted early, along with those who decided to turn out that day. The level of detail state by state is so interesting. We're going to be able to tell people in West Virginia how much the coal industry mattered to people in their votes. In places like Indiana, West Virginia, some other hotspots with senators, how they voted on Kavanaugh and whether or not that swayed voters one way or another. And it also takes a look at people who didn't vote. So we're asking them, why didn't you? Why didn't you engage this time? Why just stay home? So it measures the economy, immigration, all kinds of things, state by state, ages, race, backgrounds, to give us a lot more data about what's driving people's votes.
And you'll have those stories throughout the night. And then for the decision desk, Arnon, you'll have more granular detail as you get the raw vote totals in from all these states.
One of our objectives is to basically compare what the vote is, and we see the vote by county, if you will. We see the results by county, and we overlay that with how the vote is coming in, and we do that to, number one, prove that the accuracy of our poll, improve it where needed, and help us make the call for who has won the election in any individual
state. It's going to be fascinating. I can't wait. There's a lot more questions, too, and that's what leads to all that.
Very detailed.
All the more information that you guys are going to have. Arnon, thank you very much.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you. Great to see you guys. So we have a lot to talk about, but in terms of the House, the fight for control of the Senate is also on the line, of course. A look at the races that could make or break it for both parties.
As this special coverage of the countdown to the midterms continues live here on Fox News Channel. President Trump making a massive final push ahead of Tuesday night. 11 rallies in 8 states, as we mentioned. Several critical states could have a direct impact in the balance of power in the Senate. One of them, key races in Florida, where the Republican governor, Rick Scott, is looking to keep incumbent Democratic Senator Bill Nelson from landing a 4th term. Down there in Florida, Peter Doocy is in Miami. Peter, what are the vulnerable candidates telling you they see as the deciding factor in these midterms?
Brett, there's still a ton of talk about the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation fight. Nevada's incumbent Republican Senator Dean Heller told me he thinks the excitement on the right that created lasted just long enough to help him because it lasted just until early voting started. But he still faces a tough challenge from Democratic Congresswoman Jackie Rosen. And this weekend in Tennessee, Congressman Marsha Blackburn told me that the top issue she hears about in her campaign against Democrat Phil Bredesen to replace retiring Republican Senator Bob Corker is the confirmation of constitutionalist judges. Aside from Tennessee, Arizona is the open seat with the closest contest, and the caravan is turning into the premier issue for Republican Congresswoman Martha McSally in her race against Democratic Congresswoman Kyrsten Sinema. The caravan and border security, though, not just campaign issues in border states. I've heard warnings about drugs and people pouring into the country from candidates more than 1,000 miles from Mexico in places like Missouri and Montana. If Republicans are going to keep their Senate majority, they need to just not lose 2 seats. And there are 3 states where polls show they could be at the most risk: Nevada, Tennessee, and Arizona. But Democrats are defending even more ground. Polling indicates the most danger for sitting Democratic senators in North Dakota, Indiana, Missouri, Montana, and Florida. And the Democratic candidates in all of those places are trying to hold their seats by promoting their support for Obamacare. Brett.
Peter Doocy live in Miami. Peter, thank you.
So, as you can see, a lot of those races are really tight, and President Trump's heading to Indiana tomorrow, where today former President Obama was out there firing up the crowds, hoping to boost support for incumbent Senator Joe Donnelly. Mike Tobin's live in Plymouth, Indiana tonight. Mike, what did President Obama have to say out there?
Well, Martha, the former president was very polarizing. He told a packed convention center in Gary, Indiana, filled with Democrats, that Republicans are robbing them blind. They need to get off the couch. Never has their vote been more important.
In 2 days, Indiana, you get to vote in what I believe will be the most important election of our lifetimes.
Well, President Trump agrees that the Senate race here in Indiana is very important. That's why his last-minute barnstorming tour includes 2 stops in the Hoosier state. He stopped Friday night in Indianapolis. Tomorrow he'll be in Fort Wayne, Indiana, attempting to rally the base and break this deadlock that has the Republican challenger Mike Braun polling within a point of the Democratic incumbent, Senator Joe Donnelly. Martha?
Mike, thank you very much. Tough race there in Indiana.
Yeah, staying with that Indiana race, here's a look at the latest Fox News poll. Incumbent Senator Joe Donnelly holds a 7-point lead in this poll over Mike Braun among likely Indiana voters. This has changed from early September when Braun held a 2-point lead in that poll. Let's bring in our panel. Marie Harf, Fox News analyst and co-host of Benson and Harf on Fox News Radio. Dana Perino, anchor of the Daily Briefing and The Five. Juan Williams, Fox News political analyst and co-host of The Five. And Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist. Hi, guys. You're so far away.
Would you like us to come closer?
Yeah, come on. Dana, what do you think? I mean, I heard you talking earlier about these races. A lot of them are really, really tight, and it's basically just down to turnout.
Well, it's pretty exciting. You know, I was just thinking 2 years ago we were here, and that was obviously like the most exciting election night that we've all experienced together. This is pretty exciting. There are a wide potential variety of outcomes that could happen on Tuesday night, and neither party has really done the thing of under-promising so that they could over-deliver. Everybody has over-promised. And so I think the biggest risk for the Democrats is that they have these really sky-high expectations, and if they fall short of hitting those, then there's going to be a mad scramble. There's going to be a lot of blaming. And because you know that on the night at midnight, it's the starting pistol for the 2020 election. So there's going to be all of this jockeying. I don't know legislatively how much it will actually matter in the next 2 years, whatever happens in the House of Representatives. If the Republicans are maintain their majority in the Senate, they'll probably be able to do that for a little while. But just think, just as Senate Democrats up for re-election right now are in an uphill battle, in 2020, not a single Democrat that's up for re-election is from a state that Trump won.
So, Juan, with regard to what Dana was just saying in terms of Democratic turnout, we've heard a similar message from President Obama and from Oprah Winfrey. Basically, like, this is such an important moment. You need to get out there and vote. And that seems to be, you know, the driving force behind what they're saying. That's the concern, that people won't show up and that they won't vote.
Well, you got to remember the history of midterm elections, Martha, which is that typically young people, minorities, and women don't vote in big numbers. So what we've seen is that in 2014, for example, you got about 40% of the potential turnout. But you got to go back. If you go back to 2010, remember when Obamacare was a big item, Republicans came in a wave. I think they won 63 seats. Then you saw a bump. But again, it was a bump against church-going, religious in that regard, conservatives and older white people. Okay, so what you get here is Oprah and Obama really making a pitch to that younger, more minority, and especially, I would say, a special concern that we haven't paid a lot of attention to, the Latino vote, to get that Latino vote activated, to get them to come out. And I think this plays into why so many people think this is such an important election, beyond the kind of campaign ads and the money that we've been talking about, which is that a lot of people feel this is significant because the country is so deeply divided at this moment.
I mean, money, $5.2 billion plus at this moment.
It's unbelievable,
It's
that much money. And today we heard that Mike Bloomberg, the former mayor of this city, New York, is putting another $5 million in.
Molly.
Well, this is why I actually think the big mistake that Democrats did make was the Kavanaugh situation. Democratic turnout has been something that we saw. They were doing a good job of coming out and voting in both of the previous years. And Republicans were kind of demoralized and didn't feel great about what was happening with the Senate and the House. When you had that Kavanaugh battle, it just completely activated Republicans and reminded them of the issues that they care a lot about, such as confirmation of judges, and just seeing what happened with that made them, and having it be so close to the election. I think it was a real error. I understand the idea behind it was probably that they could get Kavanaugh out and further demoralize the Republican voter. The exact opposite happened. Somehow they stayed strong, they got this through, and it really excited Republicans.
Here is the head of the Democratic Senate Campaign Committee, Senator Chris Van Hollen, on Fox News Sunday, Marie.
This is the toughest political map any one party has faced in 60 years. We do have a path. It is a very narrow path, as you indicate. But the fact that we're as competitive as we are is a real testament to our senators and our candidates who have always said that their North Star is standing up for the people of their states.
So acknowledging the tough map.
Yeah, it's just a reality. And I think what will be interesting is the extent to which the Trump coalition shows up and is transferred on to other Republican candidates. In some of the 2017 races, it did not. In places like Virginia and New Jersey, and in some of the special elections, it did not either. In some of the Senate races, the map is much better for Republicans, and that's why Donald Trump seems to have given up campaigning for House races, I think. I think he basically is indicating, he's giving signals that Republicans are going to lose the House. He's not helpful in those races. So he's focusing on the Senate races where his immigration message, this hardline closing argument in a narrow set of states is probably going to work. But on the flip side, that closing argument, I think, will hurt Republicans in the House. The president has made that calculation, and we will see what happens there. The one thing we haven't talked a lot about is governor's races, 2020 redistricting. There are going to be probably anywhere from 5 to 10 Democratic pickups in these governor's races. Crucial when you talk about what the House map will look like after the next election. That's really important. And Democrats have a lot of places they're posed to pick up seats.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, panel. That's true. The governors are a huge deal.
Absolutely.
Well, historic levels of enthusiasm from voters ahead of the high-stakes midterms. So what are the top issues driving people to the polls? That's next.
And Crenshaw.
Oh, come on, man.
Yo, hold on. You may be surprised to hear he's a congressional candidate from Texas and not a hitman in a porno movie. I'm sorry, I know he lost his eye in war or whatever.
Whoa. Comedian Pete Davidson getting slammed for mocking Texas GOP congressional candidate Dan Crenshaw on last night's episode of Saturday Night Live. Crenshaw himself even responding to the skit, tweeting this: "Good rule in life. I try not to offend. I try harder not to be offended. That being said, I hope NBC SNL recognizes that vets don't deserve to see their wounds used as punchlines for bad jokes." Let's bring in Karl Rove, former senior advisor and deputy chief of staff to President George W. Bush, and Robert Wolf, former economic advisor to President Obama, founder of 32 Advisors and a Fox News contributor. Gentlemen, welcome. Good to have you here. Pretty incredible, Karl.
Friend of mine.
Dan Crenshaw, not the
Dan Crenshaw, yeah. Blew
having to answer questions about something like this. There's always things that happen ahead of elections. Is this one that moves people to comment about?
Yeah, absolutely, and deservingly so. It was sad. I watched it. I'm an SNL fan, and I thought it was despicable. I didn't find it funny. I've been a supporter of Wounded Warriors for over a decade, and when I see something like this, it makes me sad. That being said, I look at someone like Seth Moulton. One of the reasons I'm a huge fan of his, who's the congressman from Massachusetts, is his Serve America PAC have over 20 military servicemen and women that are running as Democrats this year. So I'm hoping that the Democrats have a shift from what we saw last night.
I mean, I would imagine that this is going to bring a lot more attention to Dan Crenshaw over the coming days.
Soon to be Congressman Crenshaw. He's running in the 2nd district, good Republican district. He won the primary. Beating a candidate who spent $6 million. He spent a handful of, a relatively small amount of money to win. And it was because he's an energetic campaigner and people get to meet him, hear his story, listen to him. He's a wonderful human being with a spectacular wife, and he's going to be in Congress. So maybe SNL can mock him as Congressman Dan Crenshaw.
Well, let's have both of you set the table from your points of view about what you're looking for come Tuesday. We've been talking about the early vote, 34 million plus. There's a lot of people engaged in this election.
Yeah, big turnout, 34 million. That's compared to 57 million in the presidential elections. That's a big number. And so we're likely to see a big turnout everywhere and a very long night, because I think we're going to have a lot of very closely contested races. House, Senate, and Governor. I would not be surprised that if the control of the House came down to literally several dozen races where there are several thousand votes at most separating the candidates.
Yeah, I think I'm sorry, go ahead,
ahead.
Martha.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a late night for all of us. I think we've never seen this type of historical early voter. We've never seen this much money go into House races. From a Democratic perspective, it feels a little better for us in the House. I'm not this whole blue wave stuff. My gut tells me, we should be able to win the House because I think based on what I've been hearing about healthcare and the direction we're going, it feels like we're running a good campaign. I think what we're not talking enough about is governorships. I think actually this is going to be a very good night for Democrats. I think we're going to pick up possibly as high as 10 seats in governorships, which will make a big difference for us going into 2020. The Senate, I think Carl could give you the numbers better than I can, but Chris Van Hollen said it to you guys well on Fox. It's a very narrow path.
Yeah. One correction of Chris Van Hollen. This is not the most favorable landscape for a presidential party in 60 years. It is the most favorable political landscape for the party in power since we began electing senators by popular vote in 1914. Never have we had an election in which so many seats were held by the opposition and held in states that the president carried.
But quickly, you agree with Robert about the governor's races and setting up for 2020, redistricting all the...
Well, they're important. I'm not certain I'd agree that there are going to be 10. Remember, we're at an all-time high for Republicans. There are 33 Republican governors, 16 Democrats, and 1 independent. Are we likely to lose some seats? Yes, because we're term limited out in a number of states. So, yes, I think the Republicans are likely to see some losses there and some gains by Democrats. It's also going to be important to watch control of the Colorado Senate, which there's a 2-vote Republican majority, 5 votes in Florida. New York's 31-31 with the Republicans governing with the help of a dissident Democrat. It's going to be fun to watch the legislature.
I'm not predicting, but you could have the blue wall back in industrial America with governorships, with
York's 31-31 with the Republicans governing with the help of a dissident Democrat. It's going to be fun to watch the legislature.
I'm not predicting, but you could have the blue wall back in industrial America with governorships with Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin.
And the impact of that on the 2020 election is going to be very significant potentially as well. So,
gentlemen, thank you.
Good to see you guys.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it. Fox News coverage of the midterm elections will have a new look as we venture outside. Tuesday, we'll take you outside to the newly constructed Fox Square. Here's a time lapse of this eye-popping facility being built last week right here in the heart of New York City.
We're going to take you out there for a preview coming up next.
Before having to answer questions about something like this, there's always things that happen ahead of elections. Is this one that moves people to comment about?
Yeah, absolutely, and deservingly so. It was sad. I watched it. I'm an SNL fan, and I thought it was despicable. I didn't find it funny. I've been a supporter of Wounded Warriors for over a decade, and when I see something like this, it makes me sad. That being said, I look at someone like Seth Moulton. One of the reasons I'm a huge fan of his, who's the congressman from Massachusetts, is his Serve America PAC have over 20 military servicemen and women that are running as Democrats this year. So I'm hoping that the Democrats have a shift from what we saw last night.
I would imagine that this is going to bring a lot more attention to Dan Crenshaw over the coming days.
Soon to be Congressman Crenshaw. He's running in the 2nd district, good Republican district. He won the primary. Beating a candidate who spent $6 million. He spent a handful of, a relatively small amount of money to win. And it was because he's an energetic campaigner and people get to meet him, hear his story, listen to him. He's a wonderful human being with a spectacular wife, and he's going to be in Congress. So maybe SNL can mock him as Congressman Dan Crenshaw.
Well, let's have both of you set the table from your points of view about what you're looking for come Tuesday. We've been talking about the early vote, 34 million plus. There's a lot of people engaged in this election.
Yeah. Big turnout, 34 million. That's compared to 57 million in the presidential elections. That's a big number. And so we're likely to see a big turnout everywhere and a very long night because I think we're going to have a lot of very closely contested races. House, Senate, and governor. I would not be surprised that if the control of the House came down to literally several dozen races where there are several thousand votes at most separating the candidates.
Yeah, I think I'm sorry, go ahead,
ahead.
Martha.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a late night for all of us. I think we've never seen this type of historical early voter. We've never seen this much money go into House races. From a Democratic perspective, it feels a little better for us in the House. I'm not this whole blue wave stuff. My gut tells me, we should be able to win the House because I think based on what I've been hearing about healthcare and the direction we're going, it feels like we're running a good campaign. I think what we're not talking enough about is governorships. I think actually this is going to be a very good night for Democrats. I think we're going to pick up possibly as high as 10 seats in governorships, which will make a big difference for us going into 2020. The Senate, I think Carl could give you the numbers better than I can, but Chris Van Hollen said it to you guys well on Fox. It's a very narrow path.
Yeah. One correction of Chris Van Hollen. This is not the most favorable landscape for a presidential party in 60 years. It is the most favorable political landscape for the party in power since we began electing senators by popular vote in 1940.